Mike Cahill, Executive Assistant to the Board of Granite County Commission. Good morning.
Blaine Bradshaw, Granite County Attorney.
Chuck Henkel, Commissioner.
Welcome everybody, Bill Slaughter, County Commissioner.
Sonny Fees, I'm with Congressman Greg Forte's
Danielle Triplin with Senator Steve Daines' office.
Jackie Bolster, I'm with Granite County DES.
Kelsey Admack here with FERC.
Jonathan Weaver, I'm with Great West Engineering.
Paul Talon, I'm with Hydrodynamics. I take care of the hydroelectric plant.
Okay, so, Kelsey, I think, I'm not sure how you wanted to start this, but Mr. West, Bill, but I don't know, Jonathan, do you have some remarks to start with?
Sure, I could just mention, I guess, currently we've got a construction project that just got kicked off on Monday, rehabilitating the dam face and spillway, doing some concrete improvements. And that's kind of the last big capital project that's been identified for the dam. Just last year we replaced the gate valves in the dam and also the gabions in the stilling basin. So there's been a lot of work, a lot of improvements and maintenance taking place on the dam. After this project should be in pretty good shape.
This is the late Commissioner Adler.
Hey.
Hi.
Kelsey's all by herself today, so you got to be
Kind of.
She didn't bring any. And Bill is our dam tender. He just walked in. And Ben is Senator.
Holy shit, Ben, you're alive.
Still.
He represents hydrodynamics today, right? You by yourself, okay?
Just me.
Just you, okay? So, you know anybody else at the table? You want Kelsey? And
Yep.
Danielle and Sonny from Senators and Congressman Office.
Hello.
So, Jackie Bolster, I don't know if you know a new DES person. So, so everybody's knows everybody. So, well, this is a meeting's been planned for some time. It's been on our agenda. It's the owner's inspection. FERC comes and goes through the dam process. So, Kelsey?
Yeah. So, as Jonathan mentioned, one of the things that is going on at the dam that I'm aware of is the new construction. So I want to take a look at what's going on with the new construction, look at the gabion baskets and the valve replacement, what's visible of the valve replacement, and otherwise take a look at where you're at, what I can see, and if there's anything we want to discuss while I'm here, just check in on some of the outstanding action items, make sure that we're still on track for those, and keep things rolling. Yeah, I think you've done a lot in the past couple of years, which is great, and come a long way, and that's really good to see. So let's keep it rolling.
Yeah, the work that's being done will not work, but Kelsey was here a year ago, right? And and was back on the spillway, and that because of that visit is really what's caused this latest construction. The gates were planned maybe 2 years before that. So, and you haven't seen this since they've been put in.
Well, so as far as I'm aware, we started identifying the gates as an action item about 11 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe 12. But they weren't a high priority. It was we prioritized them because it sounded like things were ready to put them in place last year. So that was really good to make that happen. And the gabion baskets were important to remediate it also, especially following what we saw with the spillway inspection. But when we did the focus spillway inspection here, a lot of the action items that came out of that were actually things that we also saw during the previous year's Part 12 inspection. So I think we were important. It was important to prioritize some of the repairs and rehabilitation following the focus spillway inspection as well, but those might have been action items. Regardless, they were recommendations.
Too bad you didn't see the old gates after they got it to the surface.
Yeah.
You got some pictures?
You got pictures?
Well, feel free to share because I know I saw the leaking valve stems.
It was good.
You guys have like PowerPoint? I thought we took them to the PowerPoint.
Oh,
The old valve. Ben was gonna hang them on the wall. Anyways.
So it was good deal. I got that.
Yeah, so those are my priorities for this inspection. I think mostly I want to see the dam work. I want to see the powerhouse as ever, and then probably take a look at a section of the penstock if that makes sense. Are we planning to have the whole group come along with us on the inspection, or?
Yes,
Okay.
everybody's welcome.
I don't plan to go unless you need me there, but I don't think you need me.
Yeah. I mean, they're, as they said, they're more than welcome.
So, I don't know, one of the things, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to talk about it or not, but one of the issues that we really struggle with, Kelsey, and I know this is not, but you can take it back to Mr.
Sure,
Johnson
yes.
or whoever,
I'm more than happy to listen.
is, the regulations regarding dam safety, everything on the sheet, some of the Part 12 stuff. You can see that this commission's worked really hard to accomplish everything in the priority that you've set, and hired an engineering firm, and we work closely with them. And the dam safety issue is, I think we've addressed every time. Where we're struggling is the requirements for this study, that study, another study. We'll tell you right now, the three commissioners will tell you, we're broke. We have a dam maintenance fund. The power generation part, the 10% that we take every month goes into that. We don't spend it for anything else. The previous commission, God bless them, didn't either. In fact, they took really good care of the maintenance money. They were very frugal with it. We feel like we're happy to accomplish the safety stuff, more than willing. I think we proved that. Where we're struggling, and the reason that the representatives of the congressman are here is that we think it's really, really unfair to do studies that have already been done. But we got a study, 60 grand, 40 grand, and another one, and another one. I know it's part of the Part 12, but not only do they say you're going to do a study, but they tell us who's going to do it. So we can't put it out to bid because they say, Dowell is the only person.
No. So we've talked about that.
Okay.
Let me cut you off there.
Okay.
We had, I think we addressed it during our last inspection also. You absolutely are not restrained to one consultant.
But I think we got a letter that says we are, don't we?
So
It said it
Dow
has
was
to-
the only qualified.
Qualified.
So I think that's what your issue was. that-
Exactly.
They were
We said,
the
well,
Great
wait,
West wasn't qualified.
They said, well, you can, but we're not going to accept anybody. But Dowell's the only qualified one.
Oh, for you, are you talking about the ODSP or?
To do the Part 12, there was Dow was the only one that was qualified to do that in the area.
So I'm not sure about the local limitations, but in this case, it's more of a conflict of interest issue as far as having Great West do it, because Great West is also your representative and your chief dam safety engineer.
Well, I'm not
So
sure
that's
that's
the
what we
only
were
reason why Great
suggesting.
West
We were
should do
suggesting
it.
putting out the bid, lowest bidder.
Right.
That's what we were suggesting.
Oh, yeah, and you are welcome to do that.
Okay, well, there's a misunderstanding in the paperwork that we got regarding that. The bigger issue, though,
Sure.
is we funnel every dime we make in power generation into a fund to maintain the dam,
Understood.
and it's broke. We're out of money. So the decision for the commission is, do we spend public monies to continue to maintain the dam? I got a real feeling here. I know these guys pretty well, and I'll tell you right now, I won't vote for that. So what do? So what we want to do is say, hey, come on, back off the regulations, I don't know if you're gonna find a better partner with FERC than we have in a small dam in a small community. The safety stuff, absolutely, we are on it, okay? The stuff you suggested on the spillway and the stuff, you know, all that is proof that we're not gonna let the dam go into disrepair where it's unsafe. But you need to know, we are at the end of our rope on funds on maintaining this dam. Now, as time goes by, maybe we could build up some funds, you know, as the power generation, you know, continues. We've tried to meet with the generator, they won't meet with us, that's another item, but we're open to a whole bunch of potential fixes, okay? But it isn't like we're not trying. We went to hydrodynamics, and so far they just send us lawyer stuff. But they know what we want. We want to maybe renegotiate the deal, but we don't even know if we could do that because they won't talk to us.
Worst thing about it is coming to liability, you know, we're sitting on that liability, well, we might have to end up doing like Milltown, we're getting a grant, tearing the thing out.
Understood.
You know, I mean, that's what it's coming down to, we're going broke. That's not good.
Chuck, do you have a comment?
Yeah, what's gonna happen to us? I'm not prepared to spend a dime of public money on a dam like the rest of you guys. And so what's gonna happen when we refuse to do a study or whatever? You gonna shut us down or shut it down?
So the compliance process is, you know, we have other compliance staff who would work with you, hopefully, on that, if you were not prepared or able to take care of some of the things that we requested.
Well, it's not that we're not prepared, it's just we have no funds, we're broke.
Right.
People are broke. I don't know if they don't understand that, Doug. We are broke.
I understand that.
You
Yeah.
can't print money.
Yeah.
I'm not taking from Ron Peters, take all. I'll fight that. I'm not the only commissioner, but there's no reason if it can't make it on its own, why would we do this?
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that, you know, the whole,
You're getting the blunt of this,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, it's an important issue, and I appreciate that we're talking about it.
yeah,
You're a great person, I mean, but this needs to go back, and they gotta realize we are done. It's simple.
you know, and if there's a whole group of, you know, compliance people that want to start a conversation with us and the county attorney, that's great. But, you know, we've actually, you saw the letter we sent to the senator,
I did, yes.
and we purposely sent it to you. Because if they say, well, geez, those guys in Montana are pushing back, you damn rights we are. We're pushing back. We think it's not fair. We think it's over-regulation. We think it's a bunch of bureaucratic crap that doesn't need to be, especially with a group of people, all of us together, that have addressed the safety things willingly and happily. And, you know, and we believe in this, the priorities you guys have set, and we followed every one. We've got a track record. If this thing goes to court, we'll be able to look at a federal judge and say, you know what? Here's our track record. They just keep piling on more and more studies and crap that really is over-regulation. And so the message you need to take back is they're deadly serious, and we are. We gotta make a decision. We would probably start public meetings anyway with our public saying, all right, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with the dam? This is yours. We just represent the owners, not the owners. Well, I guess we're all owners because we're all owners, but.
Yes, on that work, though, I think I'm not cutting her off, you know, I think she's pretty much got the hint that we're serious.
Yep, that's the point, yeah.
Yeah.
Sonny, go ahead, or Daniel.
No, it's fine, I understand.
I was just going to chime in. I'm sure most of the people at the table know this, but Senator Daines sent a letter to Chairman Chatterjee at the end of June, urging FERC to work with local stakeholders to reduce the burdensome red tape for these small-scale hydroelectric projects, while also maintaining the safety protocol. So just wanted to add that as well.
Thank you, and we appreciate the letter.
And so, just for clarification, this is an issue over the proposed studies
Right.
and the cost of the county, and not the maintenance and safety projects, like grout on or concrete on structure project. This is over the studies that there's already data collected.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So there are a couple things we can talk about now, and then there's some people that I can put you in touch with if that is where you're at and where you're planning to move forward from.
Okay. Well, we don't want you to think that this is, personally towards you,
No, I
mean, you're
understand.
part of a big cog, and we're just saying, you need to go to tell Mr. Johnson or whoever's next in line with you that, hey, they're done with the studies and things. And don't we just say, stop it. Quit heaping these things on us.
It's gotten to the point you gotta shut down. I don't know what hydro's gonna do or what. We're waiting to hear back from them too, but it's getting to the point where tough shape.
Does the current projects bring the dam to standards?
Well, sorry, say what?
Like the
The
current
current what projects?
projects that are happening on the dam?
You mean the current construction?
Yes.
Not
it.
exactly. Yeah, structurally, those are really good things to be working on, and those are the top priorities.
Okay.
See, Sonny, that's a good question. Let me tell you why. It's like hitting a moving target. Every time we work together and lay out our priorities and accomplish those, there's a whole raft of new ones. And they just keep coming. And if you go back and look at the history of that dam, that isn't the way this has been. This is new in the last, say, what, Scott, 10, 12 years, that more and more and more regulations and
Well, it
studies.
comes right down to it. It's just like what the lady before said, they wouldn't be here if we weren't making money.
Making power, yeah.
Power,
Yeah.
money. And it'd be state-owned, or not state-owned, but it'd be their regulations. They're completely different.
I understand that. And look, here's the thing. There's a couple things that we can talk about, and one of the things is that when we ask for things, or when we require things for dam safety, we understand that there are different priorities of different licensees. So what we do, for most of our letters, we say, we want a plan and schedule for completing the work. And what is your responsibility is to make sure that that plan and schedule is within the scope of what you can accomplish. So if you can't do, the peak ground acceleration study by this year, it was the plan and schedule that you set to do it at that time. So that's something that could have been extended. So that's one thing, and we can talk about that moving forward if there needs to be some adjustments with the scheduling of when you need to do things. And part of it, and part of it is that there are some overhead studies that, and right now you have a lot of them on your plate, and I understand that. That's a lot to do at once. But one of the things that we notice is that some of your studies are extremely outdated, and specifically your PMS study was a Montana Power Association study, and you don't have a study. That study is gone. So there's no record of that study. It is, we know it existed, but we're not able to assess it anymore. There are certain assumptions that were made when it was produced, and it wasn't recent at all. So some of the technology has changed. Some of our understanding has changed with how we do those kinds of things. So it may not be so appropriate for looking at what is actually going to flood, looking at what the risks actually are. So there's a reason why we ask for these things again, and we do it because there's no way to look at it and make an assessment of whether or not things are safe, and then it's likely that there are things that are no longer applicable to the project. So it's not, it's not that these studies are done once and they never have to be revisited again. It is that, sometimes new information happens. We understand more about earthquakes than we ever have before. We understand more about the way that floods work, and we have more data. And we try not to require those things all the time, every time there's, another year of flood information or that kind of thing. But if we can't look at things and make an analysis based on the existing study, because the existing study is not available, and it's likely that there were some mischaracterizations, that's when we say that these things might be important to do to really understand what the safety risks are. We need to talk about when things happen and spread things out so that your power funds can maybe accomplish them over time. That's something else we can talk about. It's also true that our administration's policy right now is that and which I think is appropriate but challenging, is that we are not prepared to compromise safety for the financial capability of different licensees, which is challenging for people like you, very challenging. But if there's things like...
But you're regulating us off of somebody else's stuff.
You say somebody else's stuff?
Like the dam in California. We never had these regulations till stuff like that was bad. And then all of a sudden now, we're having to pay for their mistake. And that's not fair to us.
It's very challenging for planning, yes.
We're a small outlet. And then on that other one where you said that, maybe we can wait a little bit. It's not so much that we can wait and do something. We have money to do it. So even if we wait for a year to fix something, how are we going to pay for it in a year? Do we make the taxpayers? Do we run a levy? Have we been in Granite County lately? These people will hang us. I'm serious. This is a bad, bad deal. I don't know. I'm really scared.
I understand that, and that's
just the regulations and all the other, do this, do that, it hurts.
But the only thing that dictates that you have to fall under these regulations is the fact that it is a electric generating dam, or it would fall under state jurisdiction.
What's that?
Yeah, it'd be a high hazard dam inspected, by the state of Montana.
Yeah, purely, but the only reason it's not is because
That's our understanding, because we generate energy, yes. That's our
We
understanding.
gotta meet the regulations to generate power.
Kelsey, before your time, of course, when I was brand new commissioner, the focus was on, getting the dam, the ability to notify folks if things go wrong with the dam. We spent a lot of money and connected with 911, and then we did the technology side, which was expensive, and then we did the testing, and we ran through the DES, and FERC came out and actually witnessed our exercise. They were very complimentary. We had the sheriff, all fire departments, we had everybody in the county, that does emergency response. It was, Great West ran the deal and evaluated it, and in other words, that was the focus. And then the focus was back on the deteriorating parts of the gates and dams, and then the spillway was inspected, and they said, I got a few things, but nothing really big, we'll see in 2 years. Well, then the dam in broke or screwed up in California that Commissioner Adams was talking about. We got to come back this year. So they did that. So now we're in the middle of construction project that was a result of that. And no bond in my estimate. We start seeing, now on top of that, you got to do the study, and on top of that was our understanding, you got to hire Dowell. And we just said enough, because we looked at our funds and we're out of money. Commissioner Adams is not kidding.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, we've reached out in every way possible to try to solve this thing. But we just thought, well, it's a good opportunity to be really candid with you. And through you, and not personally, but I hope you take it back, boy, those guys have a problem. And we're part of it. So, okay.
Yeah, no, I will absolutely pass along that message. I think in the short term, if there are short-term things that we need to talk about right now, for example, you say you're completely out of money. Will you be able to finish the construction project that's going on right
Yes,
now?
I mean, the commissioners worked really hard to, we know exactly the funds we have. What we committed to, we're gonna finish.
Right.
Okay, we're not that kind of people. we're gonna finish what
Well,
we're
we
doing.
hired Gray West, well,
Right.
we got a grant too, I mean, that's the thing, we're trying.
Yes, I understand you've gotten grants for the valve work, for the gabions, for the
I mean,
bid,
it's not covering
policy for the,
paying them and paying
for the,
them.
design for the
We got
spillway and for
$100,000
the
on this
spillway.
last deal, 125.
Yes.
But the project's way bigger than that, that's just a point.
Yes.
I mean, just for
It's a lot.
Gray West was $100,000 plus. And I'm not knocking, they're very good and they work really hard to keep their
Well,
prices.
we can't do it without them.
We can't do without. So, yeah.
Makes this project twice as much.
I think, you know, we're really frugal with our money, and everybody around this table will tell you that. Especially when you get paid.
So in the meantime, is there any immediate safety issue to the population of Granite County because of this dam? Like, is there any, like, that FERC sees?
When you say it's a high hazard dam, there's always an immediate safety issue. So what
But
are you?
with the current projects, like, is there, I mean, is it,
Ever gonna come off being a high hazard? No.
no, but is, like, there's nothing that is so dangerous with this thing that there can't be a schedule built to get these things done in, I mean, like, there's, like,
We can spread a lot of things out.
okay,
That's, I mean, it's a risk management kind of issue. That's
Sure.
that's a thing. It's, you know, if there is an earthquake tomorrow and we didn't update the PTA values, the peak ground acceleration values, or what we understand of the maximum credible earthquake, we have no way of knowing that it would be able to handle that. But is it likely? And, you know, there is some understanding of trying to schedule that work and do it in a reasonable amount of time that will not pose undue risk to the public. So that's a balance, and sometimes these things are identified and it's important to address eventually and maybe not imminently.
What's
Okay.
that, how much of that PDF gonna cost? Means if we don't have it shown.
What are you?
Are you doing
what PDF?
the PNF study?
Oh,
Is that what you're talking
the
about?
flood. I'm not sure that's the number that you.
I think Dal provided a cost quote for that. I don't remember exactly.
It was
what
like 60 grand.
I'm just saying, well, that's just another one, that's just.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in another complaint we asked the senator and congressman about was, you know, when we do a part 12, we all go through and we sit around this table and we go through Great West starts right away to try to accomplish issue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And finally we send a report back, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't hear anything for a year. And
That
we
is
think-
true. We have a very long delay.
And we're like,
sometimes with the
well, but
responses.
here's the issue for us. We're like, well, we assume we answered the questions, right? We assume we're good, right? Great West assumed that. A year later, holy crap, we get it. Oh, but we need to know, all that costs money. Every single time that we engage Great West and say, oh gosh, now they want to know this, this, and this, that's ringing the cash register for the people of Granite County. And, I mean, we just thought that was not right. That you could put us on a timetable, we get part 12 done and back to you on a certain date, and you spend the FERC spent a year to get back to us. That's not right. This is the part of America that knows right from wrong, and that ain't right. That's wrong. And then, because it's like, now hurry up and get us all these new questions that we've been waiting a year, so we address that too.
Well,
And
we
that's
just
not
signed
something
a
you,
thing yesterday for $700 stuff, because they just got back to us on that other, to make the concrete.
the
stuff.
concrete, that's a good example. We're ready to start
We already
a
signed
construction
that.
project, and they changed the rules. I mean, it's okay, I mean, maybe there's a good reason, nobody's saying that, they're saying, you can wait till the day that we do the construction project, our first meeting, and say, oh, by the way, we wanna change the cement rules, come on, that just isn't right. So, we're gonna continue to engage with our congressman and our senator, because, you know, they're both good people, they're tired of the bureaucratic runaround and how it affects people in small counties like Granite County. So we're gonna continue to push real hard to push back and say, you know, really, I think they need to take a good long look at themselves. But that doesn't have anything to do with you. And we really do appreciate you coming out and looking at our progress. You can go back and report our feelings. It's on you.
Well, part of my role is to facilitate communication between you and between our agency. And, you know, the more I can understand of where you are, the more I can make sure that that's reflected in what we send. But again, it is not our policy to lessen safety requirements or to step back from safety because of financial burdens on licensees. That has a lot of other implications where you say, okay, well, if someone makes a company or if someone buys a hydropower project and they're not prepared to operate it and they aren't prepared for the expenses, that doesn't mean those expenses don't exist. Right. You know, I mean, if it is also true that, you know, the problem with safety is that safety is a very big concept. And to say, you know, this is 100% safe, there are no other things you will ever need to do other than exactly what we've defined to make things safe is a false statement.
Sure.
Gonna end up
That's
just like
not-
Town Dam, we're gonna have to tear it out. I see.
Well, even the state of Montana has improved and increased standards and regulations for high
So
hazard
what good
dams.
is an earthquake study then, because you have so many variables in an earthquake? I mean, you can state, well, if the epicenter is here or there, the strength, whatever, and then it doesn't happen, and it happens another place. I mean, so then you come back and say, well, that earthquake study wasn't that good because it didn't take in this. It's kind of like with the precipitation one. I mean, you can put all kinds of variables in precipitation, how much it's gonna rise and flood, but
We're hoping it's a worst case situation. I mean, you have a fire code for your rooms, but you know, if a fire doesn't happen in this building, but happens to the one next door, that doesn't mean you don't follow a fire code.
Thank you.
That's
not the same thing.
well. So if an earthquake happens somewhere else, but it doesn't happen to happen here, oh, you got lucky. That's great. Good
But
for
the
you.
regulations will come from that other earthquake too.
But here's the
Right.
question, is a dam that sits on top of the fault in California at the same risk as a dam that sits here that has a less seismic activity? Or, I mean, maybe like,
Well, and we don't have the same standards for those.
okay,
You know, we wouldn't, well, I mean, it's the same guidelines, but it wouldn't impact the design to the same amount because that earthquake is projected to be different. You would still need to look at it and determine what it is. You still need to do some kind of study. And part of that is because there are projects where you would expect a nearby fault to cause a problem, or you wouldn't expect a nearby fault to cause a problem, and those assumptions are wrong. That's why you need to study.
well, here's a question. Does that data for that study have to come from a specific, like a commissioned study? Or could it come from a state agency or, you know, I mean, data's data, right?
Yeah, and actually, there are different ways to do things. We have certain requirements, but there are cases where we've looked at things and we said, okay, well, you know, it doesn't make sense to require, you know, an entire study specific to this project because there's a project right next to it, and we've already done a giant study on that one, and we can have access to it.
Sure.
You can share it. So if you had a project that was, you know, a quarter mile away from your project downstream, and they did a flood study for that project, it probably wouldn't make sense for you to do your own study if you could have access to that study.
Did you, any of the commissioners or anyone else here know if there was any studies that the state did or the university or that would qualify like to meet that standard?
Well, there's other dams, there's other high hazard dams that I'm sure that they've done studies, you know,
But you
within
can't judge
proximity.
the other dams compared to ours. Unlike with Chuck, you know, there's a whole different setup.
Well, but I'm saying that if the state's done study on other dams, that data ought to be, because of Montana's seismic activity.
Well, and so in this case, my understanding is that the PGA draft results are due this September. Is that right?
Well, look at it.
which is very soon, and so it sounds like you already have that study probably commissioned and paid for. Is that something we want?
I don't think that.
Is that right?
We just got that stuff not long ago, when we got, holy cow,
Well, we didn't pay for that, have we?
No, we paid some of it, but not all
No,
of it.
yeah,
It's
I
fine,
mean-
by
it's not.
the water, the rain, and snow.
Did you decide to move ahead with
So the revised PGA estimate is you're planning to do it concurrent with the 2021 Part 12D. Understood. So that's 2021 with the Part 12. That could be a separate study with a different contractor, or it could be with whoever you choose as your Part 12 independent consultant. But that's undetermined. Yes, it will. Yes.
I guess that's it. We know we gotta do stuff, but if you don't have the money to do it, how do we do it?
Yeah, it's the flood you're planning to submit by November 22nd. Okay, well, so that is, if you know that we won't get something by a deadline, then that's separate.
I guess you can't, it's just the money.
Right.
Well,
If you can't pay for the studies that we have firm deadlines for, especially the ones that are coming up soon, that's something to reach out with to us as far as deadline to start with. So what we can do is you can say, well, this deadline will not happen. And we know it won't happen, maybe because you're not paying for the study, maybe because for whatever other reason. So my understanding is that they're already working on that study, and we're looking at draft results the 6th of September, which is very soon, potentially.
we have a draft
Yeah.
that we're reviewing.
Right, so that's probably most of the work done.
Well, Dow's doing the work, we were just asked to
Right,
do a quick review on it.
yeah. So are you, if they're doing the work, I would assume that they already received funding or assurance of funding.
I believe they have a contract in place with the county to do that.
yeah, we moved ahead with that.
Yeah.
I think the thing is that we're warning you about future stuff.
Right.
And we're saying, look, we've tried to be really good partners here. But it doesn't seem like no matter what we do, then here we go with a whole other line of studies and costs. And so I think it's
Break it down, it's simple.
good.
We make $70,000 to $96,000 a year on the dam, and then it comes out.
Right.
The one study, 60 grand.
We don't spend a dime on anything else,
Pretty
right?
simple.
Yeah, and.
I mean, if you want to see our budget, you can have it. And we've also, I think Great West presented you guys with what we spent in the last 4 or 5 years. It's
We saw the table.
unbelievable.
Some of it seemed probably, it didn't seem like it accounted for the grants that you received and things like that, but that's not, it's not a line item scrutiny that we do, and it's not just how you run the dam is not something that we usually have direct involvement with as far as finances.
Let's all be realistic.
high hazard
We don't mind
expensive
sharing,
to
it's public
operate.
information, okay?
Yes.
Even the grant money is tax money.
Yes.
It comes.
And
Yes.
it's free.
Exactly.
No, it's
A
not.
lot of people in the state of Montana come and enjoy the lake and the dam.
Oh, yeah.
They got it, but it's all tax money, and we can show you what we can do. I think we've done a good job of leveraging money, but that's not the point. The point is, we're out of money. And these things are just keep coming, and we need to just say, whoa, we gotta get in another relationship here, because this is not gonna go on down the road much further, as you can tell. And I don't know if we need to belabor this anymore, but I just hope you can take it back and say, I think we need to reassess this.
Okay, I think, so I understand where you're at. I appreciate you sharing, because that's, it's not an easy topic to talk about, or it's not always. And I think that there's a couple things right now that we can talk about, and that is, let's take a look at what you have and what you've projected that you plan to do. Is any of that something that you can move the dates on. And because the dates are something that, dates of when you're doing studies is something that we can talk about. I understand that you have a certain amount of revenue that you get, and that you're looking to try and cover these studies. I know you've had a lot recently. I know you've had a lot of construction, you've had some extra studies, you've done a lot of improvements with the DSSMR, but part of that is switching to paying Great West to do things, and that's expensive also. You have Great West as your chief dam safety engineer. You have a much improved emergency action plan with some additional items on it, but much better than where you were at before. And you've just done the functional exercise the other year for the emergency action plan, which is good, and that's ongoing, but it is, that's.
Before we hired Great West, so you guys came back and told us that we had to get somebody to help us out.
Yes.
And get caught back up.
Yes.
And so, I mean, hiring them, we didn't have no choice.
I understand that, yes.
So, I mean, that's just another chunk of money that I guess it's scary.
It's a lot, and part of it is, will it pay for itself over time, over the long term? And that is partially the business and partially, the management of when we need to schedule things. So the scheduling is, I guess, probably a low-hanging fruit of what we can tackle. The other thing we can do is that we can put you in touch with people. I can put you in touch right now with people from Workwell when I get back to the office, with people who can talk to you about what your steps forward would be if this really is financially untenable. And I appreciate that that's not a path that anyone really wants to go down. But if you need to know options, that we have resources available for people who can talk to you about that as well.
Well, we do need to know options, and I think the commissioners have talked about this, and what we agreed is that, when we have a meeting with the owners, okay, we don't want to just say, geez, we've got this terrible problem. Because the first thing we're going to say is, what are you doing about it? Okay? Well, what we're doing about it is, we've reached out, how far can we push back against FERC? And we got great folks that are doing that for us. But the other thing is scheduling. We can talk about that, pushing the schedule back. The other thing we've talked about, and I haven't been able to accomplish anything on, was is there a potential of renegotiating the power contract. But the other option is that we need to come back and present options like Commissioner Adam was talking about, is just no longer producing power. And so I think the public expects that. So we are trying to put down and be able to articulate to the owners exactly what the options are as we see them. We think that's our responsibility, and we're going to do that.
Yeah.
So if we shut down, just say, this is just saying, if we should, what do you guys, do you have any laws that you come at us, so if we shut down? I know Hydro, they'll come after us because they got a contract. I'm just saying, what about you guys? If we just say,
well, so we call that surrendering the license if you really can't afford to maintain it. What you want to see, and not, if you just stop doing anything that we require, that's not a good path, because then you could be, then we can actually charge you by day. We can fine you. And that you wouldn't have a choice, because you're the entity holding the contract, so it would need to go into county funds. So you don't want to go down that path.
quit making power. Just say that we stop.
We try
not doing your.
If you cease generation, right? So that then what you could do is surrender the license, so it's no longer a licensed hydro project, not under our jurisdiction, would then be fall under the state jurisdiction.
So we get rid of you guys.
Right.
And then we wouldn't have all that other stuff that you guys make us do?
Right, although the state may have its own process, but there's also probably more levers that you can pull as far as direct communication with your state.
Well, I think we do, because then we're dealing with our own representatives and stuff is what I'm saying. I'm just trying to.
Right, I
not saying
understand.
we're gonna
No,
do
I
it,
mean,
but-
that would be part of the path, and something that you should talk about. If it's really not financially possible for you to operate the dam, you could talk about surrendering the license.
Well,
I
we're
can put you in
talking
touch
about
with
$1 million
people.
down to 80,000, that's pretty scary.
Right. Right.
Well, we appreciate, that was a good conversation. That's kind of the things we didn't know, what's realistically gonna happen here.
Yeah.
And it also gives us an opportunity to tell the owners what the options are.
Well, I think we have a better option dealing with the legislative math, being that they're here local, and we can get them where, you know, I mean, you're, nothing against you, don't take it, this is just business, but with all your bosses and that you don't even know what the hell's going on out here. Compared to, we can have these guys come and, you know,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Well, and
That's in the dirt for everybody.
full respect to Commissioner Chatterjee, but, you know, I mean, FERC regulates a lot of projects, and, you know, he will pay attention, I'm sure, to the letters that he receives, but he doesn't know the specifics of this particular project.
Is it?
We do, so because we're involved, and because I'm here with you now,
But wasn't
and that's
it,
what we're here for.
isn't it kind of true that FERC has built these other hydrodynamic things like Helma and them with that big irrigation thing, just due to the fact that they can't keep up with the regulations?
I'm sorry, specifically hydrodynamics projects?
Yeah, or not, yeah, that one over at Helma, at Canyon Ferry and Hauser and all them, they're not making no more hydro, we can't keep.
Coulter and Hauser are generating their Northwest Energy projects. Canyon Ferry is also. No, yeah, I'm the project representative for those projects too as of this year, so I inspected them already this year. They also are generating.
There's one that couldn't afford power lines.
Yeah, it's Canyon Ferry, is that?
I guess
Could be.
I'm just trying to figure out if there's an option that we can do something different, so we can keep going through with this.
Yeah.
Are there federal
Yeah.
funding sources available through FERC or other federal agencies?
There might be. I'm not aware of that specifically, but when I talk to people about, about you needing to explore options, about Granite County needing to explore options, those will be the people who will be aware of that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it is something like, we're here, I mean, we promote hydropower. Hydropower is something that we want to see, but we also want to see it done in a way that's as safe as possible, and unfortunately there's that. No, I understand that, but like the rest of what we talk about, redoing old studies, or doing some specific assessments, that's also part of the safety side of things. I mean, and we do it because then you have, if something does happen, there's a lot of betrayal with communities because people aren't expecting it. You have, what happens with the Barker and the Addicts Dam in Texas, where, those dams actually, they held back floodwater, but people were in the retention area and they weren't expecting it, so it felt like a betrayal. And that's part of the public safety element.
But if there's like a 7.5 magnitude earthquake and that dam blows, people are gonna, that's like kind of what happens when a big old earthquake happens though, right?
The dam failure is what happened.
Yeah.
Well, and so.
Then they will, like as a citizen of Montana,
Right.
if there's a huge earthquake and a dam blew, I'd be like, well, yeah, a catastrophic natural disaster just happened.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like par for the course to an extent.
And the study about who gets what,
You're all screwed at that point.
Right.
I mean, the emergency response
So-
was, absolutely, it's
Well, it's like.
But we told you you're gonna get wet.
Right.
I mean, that's part of the risk you take as a private citizen living in a floodplain of a dam, right? I mean, to an extent, there's a little bit of
There's some risk.
risk
Yeah.
that you take buying in an
personal
area like
responsibility.
There is
Gee.
risk, but it is amazing what people do not understand about risks of their environment. And
But is
part
that-
of being a civil engineer is looking at at what is an acceptable factor of safety and complying with what larger entities have decided will be the factor of safety that's acceptable.
Who's the larger entity that decides that?
It's state and federal governments and large entities such as like ACI for what's safe concrete or other professional organizations.
But is
The
it,
body of knowledge, yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is FERC's policies on what is acceptable, is that generated by the department, or is that generated by congressional action, or, you know, a higher organization's policy team?
Most of FERC's guidelines are determined by the commission. However, they're always published, and there's a public comment period
Sure.
for most of that.
Okay.
You know, there is some integration with industry and with what is realistic on the ground as well.
So you guys basically dictate your own policy to an extent.
There's some difference between what's required by the guidelines and what's required by the Code of Federal Regulations. The Code of Federal Regulations is also some of the work that we do, like, for example, the Part 12 process is
Sure.
covered by the Code of Federal Regulations.
These Code of Federal Regulations dictate these,
The
the
Part 12
list of
process?
these studies.
The list.
Congress has abdicated all their powers, basically.
Well, so the Code of
Good
well,
job.
specifically, when you were talking about requirements or recommendations that come out of Part 12 studies, which a lot of the things that we're working on right now with this project are, the Code of Federal Regulations will say, well, this is the kind of project where you need to do these Part 12 processes, and Part 12 is Part 12
Sure.
of that section of the Code of Federal Regulations.
Okay.
And this is the process, and this is how, you know, it gives some framework for what falls under that category, which this project definitely does. And then what else, what kind of, like a general framework for how that works. Then what happens is, following that framework, you have the independent consultant come in. The general process is that part of their study is they make they make recommendations, and we require that you respond to those recommendations with a plan. Sometimes those plans, now we have seen cases where, not necessarily with the most recent Granite County one, but there are cases where there are recommendations that, you know, that either we don't agree with, or that maybe are not stringent requirements. So sometimes those plans are, well, we're not planning to address this. And that's when we get a chance to look at it and say, well, that's not acceptable, or that is acceptable, or we can push that off and we need to see it in 10 or 20 years kind of thing. So there's a process for it, and it's a process that's a little bit, some of it's following precisely like a law and codified elements, and some of it is the way that we operate based on our internal guidelines, and some of it is the way that, like, the other way that you get requirements, or the other way that we have requirements, is that when we issue requirements, so like the annual letter that we send out to licensees is something that we expect everyone to follow. That's not the CFR, that's the annual letter. That's still something that is part of how hydropower operators should follow, and that's covered by the CFR, because there are other elements that say we are able, as a commission, and with certain elements within the commission, are able to say things, to make official statements and requirements that you also need to follow in addition to things like the Part 12 inspection. So it's there are just some different layers and different sources of where these requirements come from, but they do, you know, there is a process, and unfortunately it's kind of a slow process, or it can be a slow process.
So just picking on the earthquake study, for instance, you said that was recommended in the most recent Part 12D.
Yeah, it's
So could the county have, as part of their plan to address that, could they have said, we don't feel the earthquake study is required, and this is why?
well, so in this case, there was a recommendation that your independent consultant recommended updates to section 5.4 of the STI document to modified, and actually, so that was something where the statements that they made were not, well, yeah, there was specifically some redlining that made some existing statements into less reasonable statements. We can look at it, probably, I don't think that's something to get into specifically with this many people here, but
Sure.
if we wanted to talk about it technically, there were some issues with that, and then, so our requirement was that the STI document should be revised to use only the 2,475 year event for probabilistic comparison, and current attenuation relationships should be used to calculate the PGA estimate.
Well, that was just a specific example, but I think it's good to know that in the future, we can evaluate these recommendations and say, do we think we should do them or not, and kind of
Right.
go
What
back
can we
and forth.
afford,
Yeah.
push back or? no?
Well, that is a separate concern, because there are some things, some recommendations where, you know, our answer is no, and if you really don't want to do it, you need to prove to us that it's not necessary, and proving to us that it's not necessary sometimes is more difficult or more expensive than just doing it.
So
that's when,
so
that's
a
when
really-
we can
That's
talk.
a really good example. In the environment we live in right now, okay?
Sure.
There is a big movement on all federal agencies, and is to say, what regulations can we cut and get out of the way and let people live their lives, and you know, especially folks that are in small businesses, without cutting or affecting the safety net, okay?
Yes.
And that, I know that's a tough one. That's up to
Oh,
interpretation.
yeah, that's,
But
we're not gonna solve that one this morning.
But we're asking these guys, because we're watching the last 4 years of this administration, 3, that it's freed up a lot of industry and a lot, you know, and we're going, thank God, okay, because we live in an ag community, all right? And we've watched what these guys have been able to say, take regulations off of ag and open up, you know, markets and other things. So, you know, we're looking at you the same way and say, you know what, you're over-regulating here, and any way we can, we feel, any way we can affect that. It doesn't mean we don't do the study. And maybe we do the study in 10 years when we have the money to do it, or 5 years, or whatever. But what I'm saying is, it doesn't mean it's a good idea, but is it really necessary? I mean, we're used to taking risk out here. We do individual responsibilities. We don't have somebody that, we don't care or want somebody to take care of us, cradle and grave, especially not the federal government, okay? So, yeah, we're gonna push back a little bit, and yeah, we're in a good environment right now to do that, we feel. And so, you know, just send that on up the ladder, is that, you know, if it's not reasonable, we're gonna say, why are we doing it? And there's another issue, we just don't have the money to do it, I'll be honest with you. That's why we want the options that you've given us, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
What's your comment, Ben? I mean, you're involved in this, we need to know how you feel. You're here now, we are, but you're on the,
Well, I think you
I'm not trying to throw you under the table or
and
nothing.
schedule things out as available, and if they can be reasonably done, it can be.
I mean, you guys are jeopardizing, we're all in this together, and it's coming down to you guys too. That's why I'm wanting your comments on here, what's going on.
I have a question. So they do this study about earthquakes.
Yeah.
What is the end result if we already have an emergency action plan in place? What could the study possibly do any better than an emergency action plan already as addressed?
Well, so what happens with the study is the study is wrapped into the supporting technical information for the project. And the way that the numbers are used is they're used for the stability assessment for the project. So when you look at different elements of the dam, you say, will this part of the dam be stable under this earthquake? So what you can do is you can look at it and say, are we expecting it to fail in this earthquake, or do we think it's okay? And so if we think it's okay, great. Then we have the study, and what we've done is we've showed that what you have constructed should be adequate. That's great. Hopefully, the end.
It's coming down to us.
So what if they
But-
have to do it?
But if there is something that fails, then that's something where you talk and say, okay, well,
What about terrorism?
what?
Terrorism. That's another hazard.
terrorism is a separate hazard. Yeah, usually that's not the earthquake hazard that we're looking at, but that is part of the what the public safety plan that we have is often bomb threats or other terrorist action.
So
So what if the study says it'll fail at a 6 point whatever magnitude earthquake? Then what do we do?
Then there are two things. Sometimes what that requires is additional work with the structure, which is not, I know what you want to hear. I know, but I know that's not what you want to hear. But the other thing that it can be is sometimes what it is it identifies certain sections where you're going to need to look more closely at them. So after a dam, or after an earthquake, you need to, what we need to do is like immediately following the earthquake, or as soon as possible afterwards, we're going to need to look at this section, or we're going to need to look at this other section of the dam, or we need to really be concerned about X, Y, or Z things. It focuses follow-up action.
So when we're talking about this stuff with all this earthquake, is this kind of giving us a heads up that we better start doing more studies on the earthquake too?
Well, there's one earthquake study that's
I know
already
that,
proposed.
Yeah, I mean, the way you're talking and that.
No.
Like
You
you
know
have to
what?
hire somebody every time the ground shakes to go look. And that's the way I look at it.
Well, so earthquake studies, as with, they are based on existing data and the body of knowledge. So, when we know more about earthquakes, sometimes our understanding of how earthquakes work is different. But it is it's not the kind of study that we ask people to do every year. It's absolutely not. What we're trying to do is to find a study that is appropriate for what you have. And in this case, it's what is acceptable for, for assessing your structure, and the specific content of what was there previously was not. So.
We've just been joined by Jeremiah Bates and Ray West, he's the engineer of record on the net.
The chief dam safety engineer.
Chief dam safety engineer, yeah. So, I always said you were damn engineers.
Oh, yeah.
So how at risk is Granite County to have an earthquake that would affect the dam?
That is the number. That's what you find out after the study.
Yeah, well, I mean, when was the last? Was it what? Is there a study on file?
Yeah.
Yeah, was there one done before this one that was?
When
was it?
Not of the same kind
No,
of study.
that was about different. That's why they're changing it.
Well, but
So
we
what
had
it
earthquake
looks like
study,
they did
yeah.
is they
So what-
probably used old numbers from the USGS statewide report, which is an online tool. You go to the online
Sure.
tool, you plug into your location, and you get a number out. That's not something that we think is an appropriate way to do that kind of assessment, because it is a surface level assessment only. There's specific limitations to calculating a number that way.
We did that?
Probably a former licensee or someone else who was an independent consultant looking at the dam.
So the federal government won't take other federal entities' data?
No, it's good to look at as a comparison, but that specific data is a surface level analysis only. So, and it was intended to be a surface level analysis. It doesn't do the deep dive of looking at what the risks to a dam is. Actually, that specific study, I believe, was actually designed more for building codes. So for like residential and commercial building codes. So the intended use is not the same as what we were looking for. It's just easy and fast. So it's not, it's not wrong to look at it because it's out there, and we appreciate that, but that's not what we rely on usually for assessments for dams.
It's not gonna cover us, she's saying.
No, I appreciate that. That's
So
fine.
does anybody else have any questions, Rex, Kelsey, or thoughts? Anybody? Well, I'm sure Mike, our crack assistant here, has got everything written down verbatim, so we'll be able to So what's the next step? Jeremiah, did you have any comments? I know you just came in.
I don't know what was discussed.
Okay. Well, Jeremiah, we just went over the regulations and looking for some options also, okay? And Kelsey was good about kind of why she's, does what she does, and then on top of that, she's gonna take back some, just, realities of our budget and some other things that we have discussed. And I thought the questions were good from the delegation. I think it's always good to kind of push back a little bit on folks that, regulate, so that's good. Any other thoughts or comments? Should we head to the dam? And
Yeah, I mean, are you recording for the Congress people, or?
I'm recording for the owners of the county, the people.
Okay. So you have access to this recording?
I put it up on YouTube.
Okay.
But if I can say something.
Sure.
A couple of years ago, there was an earthquake, and it did affect Granite County. See that crack up there? And there's a crack in the dam. I don't know if that was caused by it, but there was also problems. We don't know if that was equated with the earthquake. But I understand the penstock broke. And I don't know if they have an alarm up there. And I don't know if when I mentioned terrorism, I don't know if there's any cameras up there at the plant or at the dam for that matter. So that's a lot of questions that could be answered. And the other question I think I'd have is, why is the county running out of money? Like you said, it's business, the way the business was set up with the generation of the hydroelectric. We should be making money on it, shouldn't we?
Well, maybe sometimes it's not as profitable as people think it is, and sometimes, there are challenges when people come in to run dams that are maybe not anticipated, that sometimes people know when they've been in the industry for longer, or sometimes they're just surprises with the project. After doing due diligence, there ends up being new requirements or new other things, other elements of other considerations that come up with the project.
And there's one thing, not to interrupt you, but the term has been bandied around the project.
Yeah.
This was started as a project in order to get the license. Well, it was completed, and it shouldn't be called a project anymore. And I think that's part of the confusion. So that it's done, we got the license, so that project was over in essence.
So in this case, the construction is, that's kind of a FERC term or maybe
It's a FERC term.
Because what we say is the licensed project.
Right, it's a FERC term, but the way it's treated is if it's an ongoing project.
Understood.
And it's not really. As an ongoing issue, the original project has been completed, but like you said, it goes back 12 years ago. And there's things that haven't been updated and confusion back and forth. So that's just, I like your card, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you.
I've got a question. When you issued the license, did you prepare any kind of contingent repairs or that had to be made, modifications that had to be made to the dam in order to issue the license?
I don't recall off the top of my head, and I do look at the license document before heading out to the project, but I don't recall. That license is, however, in the public domain, and you can pull that license.
Well, it seems like some of the repairs and modifications that they've made over the years are consistent with the age of the dam. So they should have been taken into consideration right from the start. If there were major repairs that you wanted done or contingent repairs, It seems like you should have said that at that time, or you shouldn't have issued the license.
That's, I mean, that's unfortunately not really something I can speak to.
Pardon me?
I'm not sure that's something I can speak to right now.
Okay.
So there
I
were no
understand.
contingent modifications that had to be made in order to issue the license?
Knowledge, she doesn't know.
Yeah, I'm not involved with that, I'm not aware. If you need follow-up, there are people that you can reach out to though. And sometimes, if you go to the FERC website, you can look at that kind of thing, and also you're welcome to find a copy of the license for the project.
Mhm. Thank you.
So Jonathan, what are we gonna do with the dam with regard to parking lot there with the renovations? That will-
Kelsey, do you want to go over any of these, over any of this here?
Sure, if you want to go ahead and do that, especially if there's anything that you wanted to touch on specifically. But yeah, so I know that there are, so a lot of this is the follow-up items. Let's see. But yeah, you did the valves, that's good. You did the gabion baskets, that's good. We talked about, we've had conversations about the chain of responsibility, responding to letters. So far, that's been pretty good. I did prompt for the dam safety surveillance and monitoring report this year, which is a little later than we'd like to see it, but
that was submitted, correct?
it was submitted. Yes, and was generally well constructed. Although there was one thing I want to talk to you guys about that. We can maybe add the project. Let's see. Gabion basket's good. Safety cable. So is the bow barrier installed right now?
Yes. Yep.
And was it repaired was it ready when there were people in the water at the beginning of the season?
Yes, all it was a matter of for the police that had overturned and replaced it. That was all done in a matter of a few hours.
Okay, great, yeah.
One day,
Yeah, and so we'll take a look at that when we're out there, but that's good, that's great. Looking at updated potential failure modes, looking at the new repair. I know we're looking at that, or that's ongoing now, so I appreciate that you're working on that and prioritizing that. We talked about the drains, and you guys did follow up work. And then these are the outstanding drains. And yeah, like going through this list, yeah, these are your items, and you are taking care of a lot of them. You're taking care of all of them. Have specific concerns. Were there specific items that you wanted to bring up while we're here?
No, she did.
No, okay, all right. So I know Rick retired, right? Rick Day?
Yeah. Jackie, Kevin's a new replacement with
Yes,
DES.
Jackie,
No.
yes. You're not the new person? Oh, I see. Were you the person I talked to on the phone earlier this year?
Yes.
Okay, well, it was great talking with you, and for whatever role you have for the county, thank you.
So we talked about, you had talked about some reports that need to be done by the end of the year, or?
So we did have a letter that we sent out as a follow-up to the last emergency action plan. And there were a couple items that were to be addressed with the next updates, or the next annual updates for the.
No offhand.
I don't have a copy of that letter on me,
Can you
but
just
I
send
can.
it to me?
Yes, and
Okay.
I sent it to you in, when we talked, and I'll send it
Okay.
again. But yeah. But in general, I know you guys did so much work on that EAP. FERC did a lot for you guys. It is significantly better. So that's really good to see.
You're probably wishing I had got this stone earlier than I had shut up.
You know what? I'm not wishing that. I'm just trying to make sure that we cover all bases before we go out to the project, and I think we're about ready to do that. So if you don't mind, while you're still eating the donut, you know, I think we're gonna.
As far as where to park, I don't know if the commissioner or the contractor has equipment stage, but probably that area right by the
Yeah, we
little
could go look
chapel.
and see what, that's what I was wondering, if you go by and saw what's parked
I
there.
didn't come up that way.
Okay, yeah, well, we'll go, that's the safest place, I think.
Or we could start at the powerhouse
Yeah.
and go up.
Have you got a key to the gate? Usually.
Somebody.
I don't have strong feelings about whether we start with the powerhouse or not. Whatever is most,
Is there a bunch of stuff up
whatever's
there?
better for construction.
Where?
Up on top, we should have parked up
Yeah,
there.
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
Well, when I went this morning, you know, they've got a place that they kind of marked off. I think there's plenty of space to park. You can also park, you know, by the mailboxes. You should have, as long as you're not blocking the mailboxes.
Okay.
Let's start at the powerhouse. It's on the way up. That might be the easiest. And then if we need to, folks can just park in the campground there and carpool up to the top if you're coming back out, if we need to, depending on how many vehicles we have.
Is the gate open?
They will open it.
They'll open it.
Yeah. 'cause
On the road?
Yeah.
There's two gates. There's one by the powerhouse and one by the road.
Every day, so they got keys.
Okay.
Yep. Do we want to carpool at all, or what's the?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, well, Rick, if I can get a copy of that.
Yeah, we gotta take our own card, though.
If I take a picture of it or something,
Oh, sure.
please.
We can take our own.
And then I have my business card here.
Oh, okay.